Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Ariane Unfiltered. Today, we are covering a true crime story, a very tragic story, a story that has also been very near and dear to my heart. This is something that I feel needs to be talked about a lot more. I feel like Chantel should never be forgotten, should never not be talked about. What happened to her is a disgrace. It is disgusting, despicable. I cannot think of more words to describe how horrendous the last day of her life was. And it needs to be talked about. I will try to keep my opinions best I can to myself because this is not about me. This is about Indigenous voices, Indigenous people getting justice. I know that my video might not change anything. However, we cannot just let this go. I don't feel like it's okay to just let this go. So, just quick disclosure, the people talked about in this episode are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Nobody's been held accountable for this. And I think you will all see that it's very not just. It's not fair. It's not okay. So I brought out my Stay Golden Chantel sign that that I had made for the peaceful march in her honor. I brought it back out for today's episode. And stay golden peeps was what Chantel used to say and was like her catchphrase. So, and I always thought that was really cool. And I had made this in her honor. So to start off, let's talk about Chantel. Who was Chantel? Because she seemed like so much fun, honestly. Like, I would have been friends with her had I known her. She seemed like just such a great girl. And funny enough, when I started to do the research for this video, I found out that she was born March 31st, 1994. And, it's cute that I'm dedicating my true crime video this month of March to Chantel, So happy birthday in heaven or on the other side or wherever her soul may be. Happy early birthday, Chantel. Chantel's early life had some obstacles. It wasn't always easy for her or her family. Already being Indigenous in Canada comes with challenges, socially, and racism in the system generally makes things sometimes a little bit harder for certain Indigenous folks. And so around the age of 5, Chantel moved to BC to live with her grandmother, Grace. Things changed along the way. She ended up in the foster care system for a little while, and unfortunately, in the foster care system, as we hear often, again, Indigenous folks seem to face a lot of injustice and a lot of abuse. So she was very unfortunately sexually assaulted while she was in the foster care system, and abused, and just faced just a whole bunch of trash, a whole bunch of crap. So by the age of 14, she was able to leave the foster care system, and, slowly become a grown-up as best as she could with what she had. So in her early 20s, Chantel became a mom, and Chantel was very close to her mother and her grandmother, and especially her grandmother because she lived with her and spent a lot of her early life around her grandmother. So her daughter was named Gracie after her grandmother, which is just beautiful. And again, being a mom at such a young age, like I became a mom at 24, and let me tell you, it was no picnic. And I had a support system. My son's father was very present, but Chantel had to do it on her own. And it's not easy when you're like in your early 20s, like you're just figuring yourself out. And so she had to leave her daughter with her mother for some time, and she ended up moving back to New Brunswick to live with her mother, Martha. So she moved to Edmundston with Gracie, and slowly working on becoming the grown up that she was meant to be, and making the steps to potentially go to college. She was looking at getting an education. She had just gotten her new place. Like, girl was stepping up. She was getting those steps done, while still being a 20-year-old, like a young person in your 20s. You still want to have fun. Like, this is your youth, okay? And I totally get it. So, she had her own place. She was working some things out. And yeah, like, everything that everybody had to say about her was just adorable and so sweet. And like, she reminded me so much of growing up in the Yukon and growing up around a lot of Indigenous people. She was golden. She always had a smile on her face. She was always in a good mood. She was always trying to find something positive out of maybe a crappy situation she was in. Like, she was a good girl. At the end of the day, she was a good human being. And yeah, what happened to her is just atrocious. So yeah, by the time that she was 26 years old in 2020, she had told her mom that she wanted to look into going into engineering. She had found herself a little apartment. From what I understand, it was either like a bachelor or a 1-bedroom. So it was kind of small, but it was her own. And, that's always a huge win when you're slowly getting on your feet, so, yeah. But then a few weeks, like, before her death, she started to express to friends and family that she was feeling like somebody was stalking her. Somebody was either like following her. And I don't think that she knew who, but she had mentioned this to a few people, including her ex, Jonathan. Now, I couldn't find if Jonathan was Gracie's father or not. I don't think it's relevant to the story. But it seems like she still had a good friendship with this Jonathan person, and Jonathan seemed to look out for her. She had told her family about this stalker situation, and not much was coming out of it. Like, if you know anything about stalker situations, you know that it's very hard to ever get any sort of like legal accountability for what's going on, or police to actually like look into it and defend you. So, she probably shared this with her friends and family and kind of was just like, but there's nothing I can do. So come June 4th, 2020, she had spent the day at her mom's mostly. I believe she had dinner with them and was just like her normal, bubbly, happy self. And that evening she had plans with a girlfriend, and they were going to go and have a couple drinks, which very normal in your 20s when, you want to go hang out with your girlfriends and you want to have a couple beers on whatever, like a Friday night or, so Chantel headed out the door that night, said goodbye to her mom. I love you. Talk to you later. I'm going out. Bye. So she went on her way, and she had fun that night. She went out with her friends. And from what I understand, she came home just a little after midnight or so. And from there, like, she contacted Jonathan and was telling Jonathan further about this stalker person. And she sounded distraught, enough for Jonathan to be worried. Sure, she had had a couple drinks, and maybe that fueled this like paranoia about this stalker person, or, made emotions be a little bit grander than they needed to be. Sometimes alcohol does that. We know that. Alcohol can sometimes spark a few emotions, and completely normal. Like, it's not unnormal for her to go home with a little buzz maybe, and like call her ex and rant about what's going on, or whatever the case may be. And so, she hangs up the phone. I don't know how long they talked. I could not find that information. It seems like, it was long enough and enough for him to be concerned. And I think it was a series of text messages as well that had him like something's up. These text messages to him did not seem like they were coming from Chantel. Like, he was really like, this is odd. This doesn't make sense. And so he did what he thought was right. He called 911. He called the RCMP and he asked them to do a welfare check on Chantel and go check up on her, because he was very validly concerned about this potential stalker person. Like, what if somebody did follow her home? Like, so he did what he thought was right. He called for somebody to go check on her. So around 2 a.m., like 2:30-ish, the police show up at Martha's home. Martha being Chantel's mother. When they showed up there, Martha quickly runs downstairs to open the door. What's going on? What's this about? They tell her that Jonathan had called for a wellness check on Chantel. Martha informs them that Chantel had just gotten a new apartment, that this is no longer her place of residence. So she gives police the new address, and she, she was concerned because she knew of this stalker situation thing. So, I'm not sure how she felt in that moment. I wasn't there. I don't know. But as a mom myself, if police show up at my house and tell me that somebody called a wellness check on my child, like, I'd be panicking a little bit. But also, like, I know she went out for a couple drinks with her friends. So, maybe she was emotional. Maybe there's just nothing to it other than, the cops are going to show up there and they'll find her and she'll be like, no, I'm fine. And then the police will leave and everything's fine. Like, your mind never goes to like the worst case scenario. You kind of always want to just think nothing of anything, or it's probably not that big a deal. You know what I mean? So after the police leave Martha's home, they head towards Chantel's apartment. So for context, Chantel lived on a second floor of like a house, not really an apartment building, but it was a house that had multiple apartments. And so you had to go up these steps, and then there was like a small little balcony. And at the top of the stairs, you could see a bunch of empty boxes because she had just moved in. So, you move in, throw the boxes on the porch. You know what I'm saying? So you could see the officer would have gone up and had to stand next to these boxes, and it was fairly small quarters. And so the officer, Jeremy's son, shows up at the scene. He is with another officer who stays in his vehicle. So we'll call him officer number 2. Jeremy and officer number 2 shows up. Jeremy is familiar with Chantel. He knows who she is. I do not know why he knew who she was. They had encountered each other at a previous time. So he knew who she was. He also knew that Chantel does not speak French, is not fluent in French, and does not super duper understand French either. Edmonton is quite a bit of a French town. It has, a decent sized population of English folks, and there is like an English school. And I do believe that on the native reserve that's right next door, basically, there are a lot of Anglophones as well. A lot of bilingual people, but Chantel grew up in BC, where French is not as common as here in New Brunswick, in an bilingual province, So Chantel's French was not, she don't speak French. So Jeremy shows up at the door, flashes his flashlight inside, and sees Chantel asleep on the couch. So he starts to bang on the door to try and wake her up. Now, 2 things we need to address. He's speaking to her in French, first of all, knowing that she doesn't speak French. The neighbor mentions that he doesn't really announce himself. He's just banging on the door. At no point did he say police. At no point did he say, hi, I'm here for a wellness check. He did not announce who he was. He's flashing his light inside, and it takes a few minutes before Chantel wakes up. So, I want you guys to close your eyes for a second here and imagine yourself. You come home from having a few drinks with a friend. You might be a little bit emotional, a little bit upset because of a stalker situation, and you're living in fear. So Chantel falls asleep on the couch and is woken up by at the door. You're telling me that sound doesn't spook you right up, right? So finally she wakes up, comes to in a panic, as anybody would, I feel. I think I would. So she immediately grabs a small steak knife, like a small kitchen steak knife. She does not know it is a police officer at the door. All she's seeing is a bright light shining in her apartment and at the door. So she grabs that knife and starts to walk towards the door. Jeremy's son tells her in French, drop le couteau. And this is his own words, his own quote. Drop le couteau. Lâche le couteau. Chantel doesn't, or maybe she does, unclear. But in that moment, Jeremy backs up, kind of stumbles on the empty boxes on the porch, and shoots Chantel 4 times. Immediately I hear that and I am angered. I feel like there are so many other options in that moment that he could have resorted to. And to give you context, Chantel is about 5'4". She's not some tall Amazonian looking lady. She's this tiny little nugget person and is adorable, mind you. Jeremy is about 6 feet tall. You know, he's wearing his bulletproof vests, police vest and everything. He's very much capable of even just smacking her hand and that girl would have dropped that thing. Like it's, or even, you know, grab her wrist. He was not equipped with a baton. He was not equipped with a taser. All he had on him was a gun and his own body. Jeremy resorted to reach for his weapon that night and shot her 4 times in her own home. Like, we cannot sugarcoat that. He reached instantly for his weapon to shoot a 5'4" woman. 5'4"? Let me check my notes. 5'2", mind you. Okay. And resorts to shoot her. So she instantly stops and drops the knife as she's shot. Her last words were, "I'm hurt." Let that sink in. Her last words were, "I'm hurt." After this happens, you know, backup is called and EMTs are called. While EMTs are on their way, police start to look for this knife. The knife cannot be found. The neighbor, Carl, thank you, neighbor, because I think this man knew something messed up was going on and paid attention. So, snaps for Carl. Thank you, Carl. Great neighbor. He said she did not deserve to die that night. He said the police officers looked for that knife for quite some time. You know, they found 4 shell casings, bullet holes. Couldn't find the knife, though. The first EMT arrived. This EMT also could not find the knife. They start trying to save Chantel, and unfortunately, she's gone. Eventually, the knife is found under the cardboard boxes that were on the porch. And then everything starts to really fall apart. Everything went wrong from there. Immediately, an investigation is put in place. you know, immediately the next day, basically. Martha finds out that her daughter is gone around 4 a.m. You know, after being told that they were doing a wellness check on her, then they come back and say, "Oh, whoopsies, we accidentally murdered her instead." As a mother, like, my heart goes out to Martha so much because I cannot imagine how that transpired that night and even the next day. Like, what do you do? I would be in such a state of shock. I would be just like out of it. I'd be out of it. So the fact that Martha found the strength to fight through everything, to give her daughter a voice, to stand up for all the other Indigenous folk in this country that are put through absolute disgusting things by police officers. Martha chose to use this and fight. And amazing woman. Amazing. So the investigation is started. A third-party investigation is done by the Quebec Investigation Bureau, which, I mean, is just another wing of the RCMP in a different province. You know, they all back each other up anyway, so it was like, okay, great, okay, awesome. Martha does her own little investigation, as she should, because from what we've gathered, Indigenous folks already aren't getting enough. So Martha's like, I guess I gotta do the work. Martha's grandmother, Gracie, comes to New Brunswick, and they go examine Chantel's body. Immediately they can tell something is very wrong here. There are weird bruises on her that make no sense. The bullet holes kind of don't add up. There seems to be 5 of them, and there also seems to be that she was shot in the back. So you're telling me that, you know, maybe she got up, she started to go towards the door, turned around and got shot, or got shot once. And I guess there was a shot, I think, around here, from what I remember grandmother and mother saying. So maybe she got shot once in the front and turned around, and then he kept shooting. She also had a broken leg. Very suspicious, very odd. And even the coroner or the person that had performed the autopsy pointed out how that was odd. That her leg was like not attached. It was like limp. So it was clearly broken. It took a long time also before the autopsy report was ever even released, and I don't think it was released fully. I think it was a partial release. The family didn't get the autopsy report, I don't think, ever. They got like a coroner's report, but the autopsy was kept on the hush-hush. Another thing that was very odd to me is and I'm going to be getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but in the later reports that came out after the year-long investigation, because they started the investigation and then June 2021, a year later, they released their findings. And in there, they talked about how like, what was Chantel's alcohol content. This Jean-René Lévesque person, who is, I don't know if he was the one who did the investigation or is like the spokesperson for it, the one that spoke about the findings. But he explained that Chantel would have had around the equivalent of like 5 beers in her system. And he has the fucking audacity to call her like an experienced drinker, and saying that somebody who's an experienced drinker would not be that affected by 5 beers. Maybe not. Remind ourselves, she's 5'2". This is not a big girl. Sure, maybe she handles her beers pretty well, but 5 beers is enough to, be slurring your words. It's enough to have an effect on your body, also enough to, when you pass out and you're woken up all of a sudden, it's in a state of panic a little bit. It can narrow your vision. Your vision can be affected by 5 beers. And I believe that it was like this. She was probably had a good little buzz on that night. And is there anything wrong with that? No. Plenty of people drink 5 beers when they go out with their friends and go home and pass out on their couch, and they don't get murdered by a police officer. So I find that odd personally, that this man had the audacity to say that she would not have been impaired by 5 beers. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I don't think I am. I think 5 beers is enough to give a 5'2" woman a bit of a buzz, enough to impair her judgment at least a little bit, right? So I found that to be very, very odd. Another thing with the knife that bothers me. Jeremy's son, in his testimony, said that Chantel came towards him while holding a small steak knife in her left hand. Chantel Moore is right-handed, and the partial prints that unfortunately could not be matched to Chantel on the knife. And you're telling me this woman owns these knives and there is not a single fingerprint of hers on that knife. They're all smudges. And you're telling me, they're telling us that this knife would have been held in the right hand. Chantel is right-handed. So, I mean, like, that would make sense that she would have been holding it in her right hand. But Jeremy testifies that she was holding it in her left hand. But the prints say that whoever was holding it was holding it in the right hand. So, there's just, it don't add up. I don't know what Jeremy is trying to hide there. Or maybe in the heat of the moment, he doesn't remember what he saw. But, sweetheart, you're a police officer. Remember better. Okay? So, very odd, these things that don't add up. And mind you, like I said earlier, whether she was holding it in the right hand, the left hand, between her butt cheeks, this 6-foot-tall, beefy dude could have easily disarmed her without taking out his weapon, without taking out a gun to shoot her. Even I could have smacked that steak knife out of her hand. I'm not that strong, but let me tell you, impaired with 5 beers, which I'm pretty sure he knew that she had been drinking that night. I think he was given that information. And even if he wasn't, I don't think that, like, her coming at him behind her closed and locked door, with a fucking small steak knife, and he shoots her 4 times, potentially 5, because her family says it looks like there's 5 bullet wounds in her body and not 4. Grace, the grandmother, said, this does not add up. Something's off. Something is off. And, not just Grace, not just Martha, the council chief, I believe, a councilwoman from the reserve in Edmundston has spoken about this as well. And she is also very much saying that this does not add up, that none of this makes sense. And there's missing pieces here to this. So yeah, a year goes by, the little Quebec Bureau investigation does their little investigating, and they determine that Jeremy's son should not be charged with a crime because he reacted in a way that was appropriate due to him being in a panic. And I cannot roll my eyes hard enough inside of my skull. You are a trained police officer, and you're telling me you panicked at the sight of a 5'2" tiny little indigenous girl coming at you with a tiny little steak knife while she is behind her closed door. in her own apartment. And you know, the only thing he admitted to messing up as is instead of backing up to the right, where it would have been going down the stairs, he backed up to the left and trapped himself in a corner on her porch. Everything that this police officer has said is so lame and is such trash, and it's just so... What? Now, already that is just too much and unbelievable and disgusting. But to top it off, and you guys let me know if you want me to cover this story, because that's another one that is just delulu crazy, okay? You're telling me Chantel Moore, June 4th, is murdered by a police officer. June 12th, Rodney Levi, in the same province of New Brunswick, just a few miles away, is shot and killed by officers as well. And they determined that being like suicide by cops or whatever. That was also a wellness check. Okay, Rodney Levi, somebody called for somebody to do a wellness check on him, and this man shot and killed by police. Just like, how many days after Chantel? Like, when this was going down, I was sitting here in New Brunswick, completely kerpunkled, okay, completely perplexed, completely baffled by this trash going on in my province. I was fuming. So yeah. You know, to this day, Chantel's murderer is back on the police force, back to work, like nothing happened. Like he didn't murder a 26-year-old mother in her own home. Let that really sink in. Because that leaves a real nasty taste in my mouth. Really nasty. I want to also add, Chantel had a brother, and in November 2020, he lost his life while being incarcerated, I believe, in BC. You know, they say it was a suicide. And sure, it probably was. But how Indigenous folks are treated while incarcerated is a whole other story that we could also get into. So y'all let me know if you want me to cover Rodney Levi, and if you want me to cover the prison system in Canada and how Indigenous people are treated while incarcerated, because that ain't cute either. So there's not much more I can say about this other than it is outrageous. I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think it was fair. I hope that I did Chantel some justice here today. Her story is a lot more than just being a woman who was murdered in her own home by a police officer. She was a mom. She was a friend. She was a sister. She was a granddaughter. She was a daughter. She was loved. She was really loved. And what happened to her is atrocious, and it cannot be excused. And I cannot believe that we have to live, and that, you know, I am from a place where the community could not even demand, could not protest, could not stand up for this woman and demand for Jeremy's son to be fired. This man shouldn't even have a corner store job, okay? This man should be struggling for the rest of his life. I said what I said. I said what I said. So, you know, I want you guys to take a moment to say Chantel's name out loud, because Chantel Moore matters. She mattered then, she matters now, and she will always matter. It doesn't seem like we'll get justice for her, which is incredibly disheartening and heavy and hard to take. But nonetheless, I will never stop telling her story. It is the first story I wanted to cover on this channel. It was very important to me, and I'll never shut up about it. ever. I send her mother and her grandmother tremendous strength because they will be facing a lot of stuff this year. The latest update about this happened in December 2024 when the family and other Indigenous folks across Canada demanded for an investigation into the RCMP, into how there is systematic racism in the RCMP. They are demanding for that to be looked at. And I truly hope something will come out of that, but I ain't holding my breath. Because from how this country was built on literal genocide of these people, of Indigenous people, you know, we stole their lands, we murdered them, we forced them to give up their ways of life, give up their cultures, give up their languages, we removed children from their family. Like, the list goes on and on and on of the horrific shit that has been done to Indigenous folks. So I'm not holding my breath for this investigation to go anywhere because I got a feeling it's going to be swept under a rug again. But I send all of my loving strength to Chantel's family and loved ones. I hope, I'm going to hold on to hope that something changes, something happens. And I think, honestly, the Indigenous folks need a lot more allies like me. I've been told by Indigenous people that I'm a good ally, that that my voice has helped them, or my voice is important to them, and I feel like I shouldn't be the only one. There should be a lot more white people showing up at these peaceful walks, at protests. There should be a lot more people showing up when there is a press conference to try and bring investigation to the systemic racism that Indigenous folk people, like, we need to start showing up for them. Because, like, I'm sorry, it is our ancestors' fault. So it's a little bit of our business to show up and speak up and back them up. So I'm going to leave you guys on that today. You know, stay golden, Chantel. You are still loved. You're still thought about. And we will fight for you. Because, like I said, your girl never going to shut up about it. So, just want to say thank you to everybody who has taken the time to watch this video. I want to say thank you to Martha and Grace, her mother and grandmother, who has put so much effort out there and so many lovely stories about Chantel too. They made me feel like I knew her. You know, they made me feel like I could have been friends with her. I could have partied with her. I would have been one of the girls to go out for 5 beers with her. Like, they made me feel like Chantel truly was golden. And she left a golden mark on this world. So, you know, let's do better for Indigenous people. Okay? 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 Okay. Thank you guys so much. And like I want to say again, let me know if you want me to cover Rodney Levi. I will deep dive into that for sure. I don't know enough already as it is, because at the time I was consumed by trying to know everything that I possibly could about Chantel and being there for her. You know, I was born in Edmundston and partially raised there, and I go back often enough. And now every time I go back, there's always a sinking little feeling in my stomach, and I think of her. So, yeah, I'm just rambling now, but thank you, everybody. Sending massive love to Grace and Martha. Send them love in the comment section, please. If they someday see this video, I hope that they feel loved by me and by the people in my comment section. So thank you so much for being here. Love you guys, and love you, Chantel. I hope you're resting as peacefully as you possibly can. Thank you.